Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Afternoon. I'm assuming y'all can hear me. My connection isn't great, and I had to make this call from my car. Um, Looking forward to chatting about some important stuff. I just want to make sure that I think Cameron is here. Cameron, unmute yourself and speak up. I think you were here earlier. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Well, good to be with you all virtually this afternoon. Thanks for joining. Um, I'm going to open up by asking Cameron to share about his experience of the last week, and we're going to chat some more about that. But, this has been an impactful experience for a lot of us, and I think we all experience it very, very differently. So I really thought it was important to hear from a coworker of ours, a peer of ours, who is a person of color that will experience what's happening in Indianapolis right now in a very different way. So I really appreciate Cameron being willing to be maybe a bit vulnerable and share what this experience is like for him. And hopefully it's a way for us to listen well. So Cameron, thanks for being willing to do that. We really appreciate it. What I've asked Cameron to share is not very specific, but really just what these last several days are like for him and what he's experiencing right now. So Cameron, take it away. Maybe we'll ask a couple follow-up questions, but have at it.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. I did write a lot of my notes down just because I don't want to be kicking myself later because I got caught up in the moment and didn't say something that I wanted to say. So I did write a lot of what I want to talk about down. So if you see me like kind of reading or something like that, just forgive me. But yeah, so just I'm gonna add like a little bit of perspective, and I hope and talk a little bit about like my personal experience and just like kind of some general thoughts as well. So just like for a little bit of like context, like the Civil Rights Act was passed in '64, and I was born in '92. So, which is like almost 3 decades after this was like supposed to be done. And now I'm almost 30. So like another 3 decades have passed and like we're still having the same conversations. And of course, this conversation has been going on for a lot longer than '64 or '58 when the Civil Rights Movement officially started. But that was just like a little bit of context, like the last like almost 60 years since the Civil Rights Act was passed, and we're still having the same conversation. So I've been to downtown a couple times since over the weekend, protesting and marching peacefully. And it definitely feels strange being downtown. Just like the streets are empty. There's really no people, which I mean, some of that is due to just COVID and people kind of socially distancing anyways, but seeing police barricades on some of the streets where you can't go up or down some of the streets. And of course, seeing businesses all boarded up also. It just feels kind of eerie downtown right now. So yeah, and it's unfortunate that businesses have um, lost merchandise or windows, etc. But I do kind of want to highlight that like those things are all replaceable. But George Floyd's life and others' lives that have been lost due to police brutality, those are not replaceable. So yeah, it's inconvenient, but so I just want to kind of add a little bit of perspective there, hopefully. And I know people when things start getting a little bit ugly, as far as like protesting goes, not just this time, but anytime there's a protest, people love kind of quoting Martin Luther King because he's known as a peacemaker and a peaceful protester. But it was also him that said riots are the language of the unheard. So that's not me supporting rioting and looting or condemning it. It's just hopefully adding some perspective. So just like Black folks are expected or asked to not hold the entire police force accountable for, quote, a few bad apples, police and citizens alike shouldn't hold the actual voices of the movement accountable for, quote, a few bad apples. So, and that's, it may be difficult to understand, like how people get to that point of aggression, especially when it's supposed to be a peaceful gathering. But it's because you may not know your history and what white folks did in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to Black Wall Street, or why there was even a Black Wall Street, or what happened in our very own downtown on Indiana Avenue. Know about the holiday Juneteenth, why that's celebrated, the foundation of the bourbon industry. You may ignore the cause and effect of gentrification, which is something that we deal with on a very real level, whether or not we acknowledge it or not, just due to our profession. So, it's easy to kind of have the gaze of America has always been a good place, and it's always been fair, and it's always been right and truthful. But for a lot of people, that's just not the case. So, like, me personally, I had to learn about Black history from stories that were passed down from my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. I'm a second generation college student, and my first opportunity to take a Black history course was in college. So, I think the education system, authors, publishers, they failed us all in this country, because we, only a part of the story is told, which is why it's easy to ignore what you don't know or what you don't experience. So yeah, there's just years and years of curriculum that should be taught, but they're not even today. Let me find where I was. Then also, publicly kneeling in silence was wrong. Marching could be seen as wrong. Saying Black Lives Matter, all these things can be seen as wrong. And you choose not to listen to your own cities are burning and they're shouting in the streets. You continue to ignore the cries of desperation over and over and over again. So how many times do the same conversations have to be told or had for actual change to occur? And the longer these things go on without change occurring, the more desensitized we become to the causes of them. And one of the last things I want to say is that as realtors and those that work in the real estate industry, we have a very unique and I would say enormous responsibility to advocate for fairness and equity, because it was our predecessors in the real estate industry that played a major role in creating the inequity that exists in America today. Realtors, real estate investors, banks, lenders, mortgage institutions, et cetera, they worked very hard to separate, segregate with blockbusting and redlining and steering, which the causes of that are still felt today, even though those laws have long since been, or those practices have long since been outlawed. You still feel the effects of them because we all know, working in this industry, that real estate is one of the safest and easiest ways to build generational wealth. So back in the day, if you're not able to obtain a loan, even if you qualify, you have no opportunity to build that same generational wealth. So, people like my grandparents who might have qualified for certain loans in certain areas, that may have been able to pass on a home or land or equity down generations and have that generational wealth. It was impossible back then, because Black people were just not given that opportunity. So yeah, I think it's very important for our industry in general to, or our industry specifically, I should say, to kind of pick up the mantle and really be a loud voice for equity and change and fairness, and just dealing in fairness. And then the last thing I'll say is that growth does not occur in comfort, and these conversations are uncomfortable. What we see on TV is uncomfortable to watch. If you felt convicted by someone's Facebook post or anything that friends of yours have said, or anything that you've seen on the TV, it's an uncomfortable feeling. But being uncomfortable and getting through that discomfort is really the only way that you can really grow, and for us to see change on the other side. So I would say just embrace being uncomfortable for a little while, and I think we'll all be much better for it. I don't know if I'm supposed to take questions or anything, but that's all I have.
Cameron, thank you for sharing. That was perfect. I loved hearing everything you had to say, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I think Mark is trying to talk, but it looks like he's maybe having a seizure or something. So I'm gonna give it just a second and see what he's going for.
I apologize there at the very end, Cameron. I lost my internet. I'm back now. Gosh, thank you.
Okay, I'm officially going to take over the call because Mark's AWOL. Yeah, again, Cameron, thank you. I wanted to hear all of that. I am going to go ahead and transition to what we're doing as a brokerage and how we're thinking about things, and specifically what we're working towards in terms of donations and volunteer opportunities. So we haven't solidified these things yet, but we're working towards them. Well, actually, we have solidified the donation. So we're going to be partnering with the MLK Center, which is on 40th in Illinois, to do a fundraiser for them. Our target is about $10,000 with a matching component, or yeah, the total goal is 10,000, and there'll be some matching with the brokerage through that. Yeah, Emily is working on that, and we'll let you know as soon as we have the details on that. And then I'm coordinating a volunteer effort to help clean up downtown. And we are going to try to partner with either Keep Indianapolis Beautiful or Downtown Indy. Those are the two organizations that are facilitating cleanups in downtown right now. So I know COVID adds a layer of complication to that. So we'll keep safety in mind as well as we do that, but both of those things feel very significant and important, and things that we would love to have you guys participate in. So yeah, I think we've been talking about this a lot as a staff, and one of the things that Rex said that I found particularly moving is that our slogan or tagline or whatever for the company is "We are for the city," and those aren't just words to us. Those that's really meaningful, and I think this is a time where we get to stand up and actually live that out through fighting for racial justice and for helping clean up the city. So yeah, I hope you guys can truly be a part of that in both the fundraising and the volunteer opportunities. And then I would also say that I think a lot of you guys are doing things from an individual perspective to contribute to the community, to contribute to fighting racial injustice. And I'm really proud of the ways that you guys are showing up right now. And I just want to encourage you to keep doing that. Find organizations to donate to, find people whose stories that you can listen to. I think this is a great time to listen, and listen really well. Since I am not technically an agent, I don't feel comfortable enough to talk about the next part of the meeting, but I'm wondering if Jess could unmute herself and talk about like what this means for conversations with clients. You feel okay with that?
Yeah, yeah, I feel good with that. So this morning we talked a little bit. Can you guys hear me? I'm typically not on my phone. Okay, cool. A little bit about some of the conversations that clients might be asking you guys. Those conversations are going to be about what's going on downtown and their safety. And I don't think you guys should ever put yourselves in a place of making judgment calls for your clients. That's absolutely not something we want you to do, but we want you to have those conversations, listen to your clients, and give them the facts, right? Let it be a conversation so that they can make the right judgment call that's right for them and their family. We certainly, if there's a curfew, which there's not tonight, I'm really happy about that. But if there's a curfew, you absolutely should say, hey, you're requesting to see this past curfew. Let's schedule it for another time. But other than that, what is safe to go downtown and show, if there are protests or large crowds of people, you and your client need to make those calls on an individual basis. I mean, I've been downtown. There's more than just the protests. There's definitely some lingering fumes from tear gas. I've experienced that the day after Some of that went on downtown, and I honestly wasn't expecting that. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, let your client know what's going on. If you show up and find something like that, let them decide what they feel comfortable with. And then when we're talking to clients about maybe listing a house or buying right now, and what does this affect property values, you can begin to have that conversation. I know this morning Mark provided some really good insight. Our real estate market, it bounces back really easily. We're lucky in the residential market that it tends to be, events like this haven't affected the residential real estate market. Now, when we're talking about commercial real estate, absolutely. Downtown, the commercial real estate market was affected prior to, all of the protests. It was affected by COVID. We're still seeing that. And now with things boarded up downtown, I think we will continue to see that for a little while. But we're lucky in the residential market. What other questions have you guys maybe been asked by your clients, conversations you've been having? I've certainly been asked just in the past 2 days by a client, should I be listing my house right now because of what is going on downtown? My house is downtown. We were listing next week. Should I still be doing that? Have any of you heard or had questions like that? Feel free to unmute yourself or drop something in the chat.
Maybe not that specific question, Jess, but it has been brought up. To what responsibility as agents do we have to either slow down or not communicate marketing the listings of properties we have right now, or doing open houses because of the climate and kind of how that would impact people and the movement that's happening right now? Like, basically, is it respectful or disrespectful to continue working? And how does that impact us serving our clients right now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And again, I think when we're talking to clients about what their expectation is, right? When you're listing a property, I think marketing it, that is our job. If they're hiring you and they want to list right now, we're absolutely going to market their property. Now, that decision to list right now, that's up to them. So you can talk about what you're seeing in the downtown market as far as showings and ability to have showings. And I know curfews can affect that, but again, we've seen that lifted as of today. So having those conversations and let them make the best educated decision that they can make. When it comes to open houses, I would tell you guys, you do what you feel comfortable with. We certainly don't want you to put yourself in a position where you don't feel comfortable standing in a home alone. I can't really imagine that scenario unless it's a downtown condo, right?
Hey, Jess, just real quick. I would say my question is not surrounded about feeling safe. I don't feel unsafe downtown at all right now. I think it's more, is it respectful or disrespectful to what's happening? I think that's the big question. Us continuing to operate in our jobs, do we continue to operate as normally as we would, or should we be shutting some of that down? And maybe that's more of a question or feeling for somebody like Cameron on the call. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to hear Cameron's thoughts on it. But I do think marketing and sorry, now there's another couple. I should have done this in my office. I didn't know I was going to be talking.
Jess, I am now better internet
Oh,
connection,
good.
by the way.
Good.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you want to chime in on the appropriateness of working through
Yeah.
this in marketing and having open houses?
I think it's a fantastic question. I've been wondering the same, Natalie. I mean, I haven't been asked that, but I feel that internal tension. Um, one thing I would say is you are under contract with a current client to sell their house. If you're going to change behavior, like outside of that contract, I think you have to have a conversation with the client. And so I think we're all going to have very different convictions on this. If you think it is most appropriate to halt marketing on a property, I think you need to do a release a listing contract with that client. And my guess is that if that's a conviction that you feel, I think most of your clients are probably going to really respect that and be willing to do maybe a temporary release or something like that. I wouldn't want you as an agent to be in a position where you were legally contracted to a client to perform certain duties and you hadn't changed that contract but were acting out of conviction to respect the movement. So I think it's really hard, but important. As much as possible, work that out in conversation with the seller. Um, gosh, I do have my own answer to the is it appropriate. I think I'm probably answering the if you feel that conviction as an agent, what do you do? But I don't think you're necessarily asking what's my personal conviction on that. Cameron, would you be willing to chime in on that?
Sure. I wouldn't personally find it as like insensitive to the movement at all. You know, I think, like you said, Mark, you know, we have contracts with our sellers, and we have duties to our buyers to either help them into or out of the situation that they're in as well. And I don't think, you know, my short answer is that I don't think that it would be viewed as insensitive, at least not to me, to continue working for the people that, you know, we agreed to be working with and for.
Natalie, I think that's a great question. I think in most cases, an agent would be able to like remove the potential conflict between their duty and their conviction in conversation with a client. If you end up in a spot where that's really hard to do, I would say get feedback from as many people as you can. One thing, and now that I have a better internet connection, sorry about that, guys. Just bouncing off something that Jess said, I think we should be careful in talking about like what will happen with residential real estate in the middle of protests in a very significant cultural moment in the life of the city. Residential real estate is as resilient as it gets in terms of markets. Very, very few things knock residential real estate down in price for a long period of time. Essentially nothing does for a long period of time. And I mentioned this morning as I was thinking about this that I'm not celebrating that. I actually think you could make a really good argument that it would be better for our culture if a cultural moment like this could do damage to residential real estate. So I'm not making a value statement on whether I think this is good or bad. I think the reality is that history tells us residential real estate tends to move on very quickly and with strength in the middle of challenging circumstances. So I think that's what's likely to happen. But I think at the same time, like handle how you would communicate about that with like care and respect. Not to brush off the significance of what's happening. I think both can be true. There can be an enormous cultural moment, and residential real estate can continue as if it wasn't impacted. I think we've observed that happen in the past. And gosh, I mean, among several things, I think that I was really encouraged that Cameron, that you shared. One of the things that sticks out to me that you shared is that just to highlight, like, this moment highlights the responsibility that our industry carries, for better or worse, right? We may not handle it well, honestly, as an industry, but we do play a significant role in equitable outcomes, or unequitable, as an industry. We just do. And so I'm hoping for myself and for us that a cultural moment like this increases our awareness of that responsibility. And Cameron, by the way, I hate the timing of my bad connection there. The thought that you put into what you wanted to share, man, thank you. Like, you clearly wanted to share something meaningful with us, and that was, yeah, it was very, very meaningful.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. One thing I would add, I know while I was gone there for a moment, Rosie shared about some things that we're working on as a brokerage to kind of engage as a group in terms of fundraising and community service. And that's great. And we hope it's an opportunity for each of you to engage in a way that maybe you wouldn't by yourself. But I would also say it is a mark of this group of people that you are very engaged in the life of your city, like in different ways, at different levels, different life stages. But I think that's one of the things that we have in common as a group, is a lot of engagement, a lot of neighborhood and community support. And so I just encourage you, be it formal or informal, collectively or individually, I think there is a really great opportunity here to engage in the life of the city. And that we call it a tagline, right? The brand tagline, "We are for the city." I think this is broadly known, but the intent of that tagline isn't just to say we are experts. Like, that's a part of that, but it's also meant to say we are advocates, we are supporters, we're encouragers, we're rooting for, we're fans of the city. And hopefully that's true all the time, but I think it's moments like this where it's like, well, okay, so what does that mean? That's a hard question, but I think seeking out opportunity to engage and support in your neighborhood or in your city, now's a great time to do it. And honestly, I think it could be hard right now. I've been reaching out over the last several days to those that I would consider close friends and asking them, what should I be doing right now? And one of the themes in their answers is, well, that's not a simple question. And I don't have a simple answer for you. I think they've given me good answers, but it's not easy. And so I think, don't expect it to be easy to just kind of snap your fingers and decide, oh, this is what I'm going to do. But I think asking, get feedback from your peers, from friends, from neighbors. What are you doing? What can I be doing? And keep doing that until you find a good opportunity or opportunities to engage. And I thought about highlighting several things that I have seen realtors at Platt doing. I decided not to, because I know that I would miss some, very real, immediate example of one of you serving. But that's been an encouragement for me. Like, watching you and listening to people engage. I think that's great. So we would love to see more of that. Hopefully the brokerage can maybe kind of collaborate within itself to do some more of that. Yeah, to echo Jess's point earlier, I think one of the things we're going to learn in 2020 is what does it look like not to be a decision maker for your client? I think the more challenging the circumstances are, the more critical it is to realize that is not your job. Your job is to help a client process their own priorities and values, figure out what it is that they're looking to achieve, help them think through the options, give them really good information and advice, make sure they understand everything that's on the table. And then when they decide what's best for them, you execute it, assuming it's in the bounds of our code of ethics, right? And that's always true, but particularly when there's a lot of tension surrounding what's happening in the marketplace, what's happening in our city, what should we be doing right now? I actually think all the more reason to ensure that your client is in the role of decision maker, your advice giver, counselor, and the one who's executing that strategy. Easier said than done. But I think that removes a lot of the tension in what should we do as realtors when there's a lot of unknowns. Because when there's a lot of unknowns, I think your job as a realtor is oftentimes to say, there's a lot of unknowns. And that's okay. You don't need to feel the pressure. One of the things that I've learned, the more experienced a realtor is and the better they are at their job, the more likely they are to say, I don't know, to a client. And the more likely I think they are to get feedback from peers. Like, we get asked every bit as many questions from the most experienced people in our company. And so it's just time and place encouragement to be doing that a lot right now. Cameron, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to ask you one question, and maybe we could wrap up with, if you're willing to answer this. We're in an industry that, like, hey, let's just be honest. Professional representation in our industry doesn't look like our city, right? It just doesn't. You and I have had this conversation. Very, very slow improvement in that regard, but nonetheless very slow, and it doesn't look like our city. So in light of that, as professionals who are representing buyers and sellers, and in this moment, what's the one thing that you would say to a professional industry specific to our job? So that's a hard question. I am putting you on the spot. I really appreciated a couple of things that you shared, and it just, my natural reaction is, okay, I'm in an industry dominated by white professionals. What would Cameron have us understand in light of our jobs as realtors? You want to take a crack at that? Let me just throw out this enormous and difficult question with 5 minutes to go. How's that?
Yeah, I can try.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think part of it is just like a big education or miseducation of like the power and like the gravity of real estate. I think like for me personally, one of like the draws of me getting into real estate was because I know that it is one of the safest and easiest ways to build upon generational wealth for like my future family and their future families. So when, those of us that don't know that history, it's easy to kind of like overlook why it would be important to be either an expert in real estate, or at least have like kind of a working knowledge of why you should at least be paying attention to it, because it affects everything. It affects stock markets, it affects, global economies, and all kinds of things like that. So I think it's kind of a miseducation of how important a role real estate plays in community building, and really like how cities come to be and how they're laid out and all of that. So I think and I don't know what like a solution to that would be necessarily, but I think if more people just in general had a better understanding of what real estate can do for them, either professionally or just maybe I should pick up a rental property, or maybe something like that, and how it can help themselves, help their pocketbooks, help their kids and their kids' kids, and help the overall economy. I think we all kind of win when money is circulating, not just in one demographic, but like all over the city and all over the state and all over the country.
That's great, man. And it's as if I prepped you with that question, which I promised everyone I did not. Cameron was just ready for that question, so thank you. Well, hey, I'd love for that to be the last word of the call. I think that's great. Cameron, thank you. I know how seriously you take this, and I know it's not easy, so that is very, very helpful. More info to come on a fundraising effort for the Martin Luther King Center and volunteer opportunity downtown. Y'all, thanks for joining the call. I'll say it one more time. I'd encourage you, even more than normal, engage with your peers. You had a great staff. Rex and I, your teams and your co-agents. I think this is an important time to be bouncing ideas off of people and learning from each other. So thanks for joining. Everybody have a great rest of your day.